We all know that wishes and gifts are powerful. They can earn us acceptance and trust of both friends and foes. It is such scenario that Hezekiah made a mistake of sowing all his treasuries to the emissaries of Babylon. Another dismay was the life of Manasseh, a life diametrically opposite to his God-fearing father, Hezekiah. Dear friends, we have been looking at the goodness and greatness of God in King Hezekiah's life. All the threats of Rabshakeh, the messenger of Sennacherib, the king of Assyria against Judah, vaporized in thin air as they had to focus on another battlefront. Because Hezekiah took to prayer all his enemies and worries, God lined the Assyrian threat to himself, saying, "Who is it you mocked and blasphemed? Against whom have you raised your voice and lifted your pride? Against the Holy One of Israel." God then reminded Sennacherib that it was he who designed long ago that the Assyrian king would be used as his instrument to crush and subdue nations for his glory. But because he took the glory to himself, God tells the king that he would now be hooked. We also saw the remarkable recovery as well as the addition of 15 years to hopelessly sick Hezekiah, a miracle granted and affirmed with another miracle, 10 steps reversal of shadow that had descended on Ahaz's stairway. With that brief review, let us turn our hearts again towards the study of the book of 2 Kings.
Verse 12 of chapter 20 of 2 Kings. At that time Merodach Baladan, son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent Hezekiah letters and a gift, because he had heard of Hezekiah's illness. This seems to be a get-well card and a gift. Hezekiah, in verse 13, received the messengers and showed them all that was in his storehouses, the silver, the gold, the spices, the fine oil, his armory, and everything found among his treasures. There was nothing in his palace or in all his kingdom that Hezekiah did not show them. Can you imagine? Hezekiah is doing a very foolish thing. He let the ambassadors from Babylon, of all places, see the treasure that Solomon, his forefather, had gathered. The wealth of the world was there, which was not for general knowledge. Hezekiah was big-hearted. Babylon had sent him a get-well card. So he gives these men of Babylon a guided tour of his kingdom. Verse 14. Then Isaiah the prophet went to King Hezekiah and asked, "What did those men say, and where did they come from?" "From a distant land. They came from Babylon," Hezekiah replied. The prophet asked in verse 15, "What did they see in your palace?" "They saw everything in my palace," Hezekiah said. "There is nothing among my treasures that I did not show them." He rolled out a red carpet and showed them everything. Verse 16, Then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, "Hear the word of the Lord. The time will surely come when everything in your palace and all that your fathers have stored up until this day will be carried off to Babylon. Nothing will be left, says the Lord." These ambassadors, friends, made an inventory of all the riches and took it back to Babylon to wait for a proper time when they needed gold. When they wanted to get the treasure, they knew where to come. Verse 18, "And some of your descendants, your own flesh and blood, that will be born to you, will be taken away, and they will become eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon." This is what is going to happen to Hezekiah's own offspring. Verse 19, "The word of the Lord you have spoken is good," Hezekiah replied to Isaiah, for he thought, "Will there not be peace and security in my lifetime?" I don't like Hezekiah's reply to Isaiah, friends, really. It was not a confession of sin, you notice, but rather he wanted peace in his day and showed little concern for his offspring upon whom this whole catastrophe is about to fall. Verse 20. "As for the other events of Hezekiah's reign and all his achievements, and how he made the pool and the tunnel, by which he brought water into the city, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Hezekiah rested with his fathers, and Manasseh his son succeeded him as king." This may seem like an awful thing to say about Hezekiah, but Hezekiah should have died when the time came for him to die. 3 things took place after God extended his life that were foolish, absolutely foolish acts. 1, he showed his treasures to Babylon, which will cause great trouble in the future. Then he got a son, Manasseh, who was one of the most wicked king of the whole nation. He revealed an arrogance and impudence in his later years. His heart became filled with pride. 2 Chronicles 32 and verse 25 elaborates, goes into the details of Hezekiah's arrogance and pride even in his old age. Now you notice, friends, Manasseh's sins. Chapter 21 of 2 Kings. Manasseh was 12 years old. 12 years old when he became king. And he reigned in Jerusalem 55 years. His mother's name was Hephzibah. Manasseh began his reign as a 12-year-old boy. He was a small, young boy, but one day he will outgrow it. Well, he did not actually outgrow his immaturity. He became worse and worse and worse. He reigned for a full 55 years. God gave him ample opportunity, friends, to change from his ways. In 2 Chronicles, we find that he did finally repent. God is always patient, always long-suffering. He's not willing that any should perish. Manasseh's mother's name is mentioned. Her name is Hephzibah. You notice? She will have to accept the responsibility for her son. If there is any credit, she will receive that too. But Manasseh was wicked and a godless king. Verse 2. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, following the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. Manasseh, friends, was as bad as any of the other neighboring kings that God put out of the land when he brought his people into this land flowing with milk and honey. Verse 3. Notice what Manasseh does. In his person, he was evil. Now notice in his action what he does. He rebuilt the high places his father Hezekiah had destroyed. What arrogance! His father took time to destroy all these high places, and he rebuilds it. He also erected altars to Baal and made an Asherah pole, as Ahab, the king of Israel, had done. He bowed down to all the starry hosts and worshipped them. Hezekiah, you recall, had destroyed every high place of worship, and a partial revival took place under his influence. All of his work came to naught because Manasseh undid all the things his father had done. He worshipped the starry hosts. Verse 4. He built altars in the temple of the Lord, of which the Lord had said, in Jerusalem I will put my name. Imagine, friends, he builds altars of Baal in the temple of the Lord, as if there was no other place in the whole nation. He chooses the temple. Verse 5. In both courts of the temple of the Lord, he built altars to all the starry hosts. Imagine how he is pushing God to react, but God is patient. Verse 6. He sacrificed his own son in the fire, practiced sorcery, divination, consulted mediums and spiritists. He did much evil in the eyes of the Lord, provoking him to anger. He even made his own son pass through the fire or into the fire. This was a dangerous practice of the nations. Verse 7. He took the carved Asherah pole he had made and put it in the temple, of which the Lord had said to David and to his son Solomon, in this temple and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name, my character, my person there forever. But God's person goes, and an Asherah pole enters. Verse 8. I will not again make the feet of the Israelites wander from the land I gave their forefathers, if only they will be careful to do everything I commanded them, and will keep the whole law that my servant Moses gave. But the people did not listen. Manasseh led them astray, so that they did more evil than the nations the Lord had destroyed before the Israelites. I repeat that last line. Israel did more evil than all the nations the Lord had destroyed before the Israelites occupied that land. Not only was Manasseh as bad as the neighboring kings, but he was worse. We have news. God will not tolerate the Israelites' wickedness. He will put them out of the land once again. Verse 10. The Lord said, through his servants the prophets, Manasseh, king of Judah, has committed these detestable sins. He has done more evil than the Amorites who preceded him, and has led Judah into sin with all the foreign gods. Therefore, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, I am going to bring such disaster on Jerusalem and Judah that the ears of everyone who hears it will tingle. I will stretch out over Jerusalem the measuring line used against Samaria, and the plumb line used against Ahab. I will wipe out Jerusalem as one wipes a dish, wiping it and turning it upside down. Jerusalem is juxtaposed next to Samaria as the measuring line. Samaria went to captivity. Now Jerusalem will follow. Just as God had judged Samaria and all Israel, God is going to judge Jerusalem and Judah, my friend. Oh, precious one. God said he will wipe Jerusalem as a man wipes a dish. Can you imagine the heart of God? With love he called them, he sought them, he brought them out with eagle's wings. And now they forced God to such anger as one wipes a dish. He will wipe them out and turn them upside down. Notice verse 14 now. I will forsake the remnant. I will forsake the remnant of my inheritance and hand them over to their enemies. They will be looted and plundered by their enemies. Even the remnant, the faithful, will be forsaken by God. God says that he's going to take his finger out of the blockage and let the enemy come in like a flood. Verse 16, moreover, Manasseh also shed so much innocent blood that he filled Jerusalem from end to end, besides the sin that he had caused Judah to commit, so that they did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Manasseh is evil, and so the whole nation of Judah did that which was evil in the eyes of the Lord. If you don't correct your ways, you cannot correct your children's ways years from now. Verse 17. As for the other events of Manasseh's reign and all he did, including the sin he committed, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Manasseh rested with his fathers and was buried in his palace garden, the garden of Uzzah, and Ammon, his son, succeeded him as king. This, my friend, is the story, the pathetic story of Manasseh. There is not much to say except that he was evil, that he was corrupt, and that he died. Verse 19. Ammon was 22 years old when he became king. He reigned in Jerusalem 2 years. His mother's name was Meshullemeth, daughter of Haruz, and she was from Jotbah. Verse 20. He, Ammon, did evil in the eyes of the Lord, as his father Manasseh had done, to the same proportion. He walked in all the ways of his father, worshipped false gods his father had worshipped, bowed down before them. He forsook the Lord, the God of his fathers, and did not walk in the way of the Lord. Ammon is a bad man. He walked in the footsteps of his father. He forsook the Lord. And very soon we will see that if you continue to forsake the Lord will be forced to forsake you. Verse 23. Ammon's officials conspired against him and assassinated the king in his own palace. What do you say, friends? Ammon's wickedness led to a revolution. His own officials conspire against him and assassinate the king in his own home, the palace. Verse 24. Then the people of the land killed all who had plotted against the king Ammon, and they made Josiah his son king in his place. As for the other events of Ammon's reign and what he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? He was buried in his grave in the garden of Uzzah, and Josiah, his son, succeeded him as king. This section, my friend, brings us to the last of the great kings. Josiah was not only a great king, but the greatest revival took place during his time. Today, friends, we considered 3 characters: Hezekiah, his foolishness, and then his death; Manasseh, the next king, his sins, and then his death; and then Ammon, his sins, and then his death. Finally, we find Josiah on the throne of Judah. Sin and the child of God are incompatible. They may occasionally meet, but they cannot live together in harmony. That's what we found among these kings. But as far as Josiah was concerned, we will consider how all these kings, including Josiah, many kings, jumped because they trusted their father. How is your life? Are you ready to jump into your father's open arms? Remember, not because we can see, but with a certainty that we are seen. We are seen, my friend. We are seen. Every moment of the day, we are seen. God bless you.
Conclusion. Well, friends, I hope you were thrilled to go through the action-filled Bible study lesson today. Pride and selfishness are 2 vices to flee from in our daily lives. Every individual who takes God's warnings lightly will certainly make costly mistakes. Godly discernment warns us that no decision is to be ever taken emotionally without the guidance of God, the all-knowing, the God who sees the future of every individual or nation. Once more, the wickedness of Manasseh, notwithstanding the presence of a godly father, Hezekiah, only brings back to mind the families of Eli, Samuel, David, and many others. This too is a wake-up call that no parents, no matter what educational qualifications we acquired or which position or leadership we hold, are capable of raising worthy children without God's grace and direction. To understand this is even more important in our generation because children are exposed to so much vice right from their young age. So the bottom line of our study today is we need God for everything. God bless you.